Hey there, this is Jody Clark, and welcome to my podcast, I Woke Up Dead, Now What? In our conversations, we'll talk about real issues that everyday people face should they wake up dead without a life after death plan in place. Join me as we explore the how-tos on preparing for you or your loved one's passing without breaking the bank. And let's not forget about those pets too. Now, don't you fall asleep. Hey, I'm Jody Clark, and welcome to my podcast, I Woke Up Dead, Now What? Welcome back. So today's topic is, are you a consumer or a commission? I want you to think about that. Have you ever received an invitation in the mail from your local funeral home inviting you to an event like pizza and pre-planning? Or how about a lunch and learn at a local establishment offering a free lunch in return for listening to someone representing the funeral home and discussing the value of pre-planning your funeral? Well, if you're my age, I'm sure many of you have. Regardless of if you have or have not, over the next few minutes, I want to talk about the things that most funeral homes and pre-planning specialists don't want you to know. Well, why am I talking about this? Well, because my 30-plus year career of teaching funeral pre-planning to both funeral homes, cemeteries, and pre-planning specialists, this is one particular method of attempting to sell pre-planned funerals to you, the consumer. From my viewpoint, it fundamentally takes advantage of the consumer. How do I know this? Well, when I was employed by the insurance companies, the majority of funeral homes and cemeteries used this method to attract pre-planned funeral sales. I typically did not encourage my customer, at that point in time was the funeral home, to offer it as a way to increase pre-need sales to you, the customer, because I fundamentally thought it was not forthcoming, and I still feel that way today. I mean, let's face it, nothing in life is free, or there's no free lunch, pun intended. So here's the overall strategy. Well, prior to the, quote, educational event, that lunch and learn, the funeral home or cemetery reaches out to a well-known establishment, restaurant, pizza, someplace like that, and they suggest that they would like to have an event at their facility or even at the funeral homes. The premise is that by working together, two trusted names will unite and invite the community in for an educational venue. The benefit is that whoever hosts this facility will be showcased, and whoever provides the food, their food will also be showcased, and this will translate hopefully into future, sales or business. It all begins with a direct mail list, which is purchased based on who they want for their target audience. Typically, it's people between a certain age group, in a zip code, and possibly even a marital status, like widowed or divorced. An invitation is created and mailed out. The cost is typically shared between both facilities, the funeral home and the dining establishment. The co-branding benefit is that when this letter or invitation goes into everyone's mailbox, or if it was done digitally, email, they're going to receive name recognition, which is hopefully going to heighten top-of-mind awareness and possibly generate attendance. I mean, after all, they want butts in seats, to be blunt. So what happens at this event? Well, there's a budgeted menu that's offered. It could be all the pizza and salad you could eat. It could be you've got a limited amount to order a sandwich or something off of the menu. It could be a number of things. In return for attending, it is encouraged that the consumer listens to what the pre-planning specialist has to offer about their burial or cremation offerings. Names, addresses, emails, even phone numbers are collected by the attendees when they come in. What happens is these people have now become precious property, if you will, because now they become a part of both businesses' mailing list for future marketing purposes. At some point, everyone receives a pre-planning packet, which does include a general price list from the funeral home or cemetery. That is always required by law, by the way. The presentation or conversation encourages the individual to make a plan, which will provide for those they leave behind a roadmap, the peace of mind that's knowing that it's all taken care of, and the internal funeral costs are typically guaranteed. And in some states, they must be guaranteed. Michigan is one of those states, by the way. What they cannot guarantee are things that are other people's charges. That would be other businesses. For example, that would be a death certificate. At some point, the consumer is encouraged to schedule an appointment to discuss their own arrangements in the privacy of their own home or even come into the funeral home. Here's where it all gets dicey. Payment plans are highly pushed and focused on. The benefits that are touted are ease of financial commitment for a small amount down. The payment plan can go as high as 20 years, which makes that dollar amount very small, especially if you are on a fixed income, making it affordable. Right after they talk about that, the next thing out of their mouth is early payoff options offering same as cash within a designated time. You know, kind of like those windows. You know, if you buy today, you can get so many months interest free and then the interest kicks in, or you can pay it off within a year. And that's just an example, but they do offer early payoff options. Should death occur, and it might, during that designated time before that payment plan is completed, they really focus on making sure you know your funeral of choice is paid for. Now, they don't talk about anything like how much interest is being charged, or they call it in that premium the insurance risk. Quite frankly, if you do the math, it's paid for 5 and 6 times over in some cases, but that's another day for another conversation. Should death occur within the early months and years of the contract, all payments and interest are returned to the family or the funeral home and will go towards the funeral cost. And what that means is there's usually a grace or a waiting period of time. So let's just say 1 or 2 years, and it all depends on what state you're in. So if within those 1 or 2 years death does occur, the family's not out, but sometimes the funeral is not paid for. It's also transferable to any funeral home, but the price guarantee is no longer in place, meaning that if you go to funeral home A and then you move across the country and take it to another funeral home, no one can guarantee other people's charges. And then there is always a grace period for cancellation. One might think, what's not to love, right? I mean, it makes sense. Our well-known community funeral home would never take advantage of us. They want us to create a win-win for the family and the funeral home, right? Heck, they even paid for our meal. On some level, you, the consumer, may feel obligated. But here's what no one is telling the consumer or talking about. Frequently, but not always, the pre-planning specialist is not truly a funeral home employee. It is a contracted employee from a pre-planning third party. Basically, what I'm saying is they represent the funeral home, but they're contracted out, and they are not someone that typically is at that funeral home every day, and nor do they live in the community. What this means is that there's a middleman, and this middleman is another company who trains people to sell pre-planned funerals. These individuals are compensated via piecework and or commissions. So how that works is that direct mail piece might go out into the home, or that third party may be the person speaking, and then your name becomes part of their list that they can work over and over until you break down and buy a contract. Some of the third party providers have people who work for multiple funeral homes, and they only come into town when there are leads from people who have responded to the direct mail or to the Lunch and Learn and other community members who have replied to some form of a marketing campaign. And then they move on. So they don't have to look you in the eye. They don't see you at the grocery store. They are there strictly to make a sale. This is not legal. It is not illegal, but it can be misleading. If the pre-need consultant isn't a funeral home employee and they're on a daily basis, nor do they live in the community, again, I can't say it loud and strong enough. It's about a sale, not creating a long-term relationship. The benefit to the funeral home is that they have an aggressive pre-planning program without the responsibility of a full-time employee to manage, quite frankly, pay, so there's no overhead to them. One might compare this to subletting an employee, much like a temp agency. So what's my point? Why am I talking about this? Well, you need to know who you're doing business with. Use your common sense. Nothing is free. Again, no free lunches. Well, the meal may be paid for, and yes, you held up your end of the bargain by staying to listen. You were compensated for your time to sit there. Therefore, you have no obligation. Time is a precious commodity these days. I'm speaking as a funeral home professional, and I believe in pre-planning, but I also believe that the consumer has to know what's going on, and I'm interested in the due diligence. I want consumers to know that whoever they're doing business with is transparent. This is why I'm sharing this information with you. I'm confident everything that was done to set up an event is legal and it made sense. In fact, the third party could be a very reputable third party. So is the funeral home and so is the dining establishment. But what is concerning is the fact that your time was bought. You may not have felt pressured, but you may not have been completely asked for your business because they're going to reach back out to you later because that third party is compensated by commission. So therefore, you only caught half the story. If they're pressuring you to make the sale or let you know that this offer is only good for 30 days, run. Run screaming from the building. I mean, you have the gift of time and you should do your information due diligence. Compare. Go to another funeral home. If the particular one resonates with you and you want to go back, then do so. However, if the offer's good today, it's going to be good 30 days from now as well. There should be no pressure. So in closing, I want you to ask these questions. Is the pre-planning specialist an employee at the funeral home or is it contracted by a third party? Ask them flat out. Is the pre-planning specialist being paid through the funeral home or through a third party by commission sales? Will the pre-planning specialist be available should I come to the funeral home at any given time? Meaning, are they a member of this community? Then ask the hard question. Why should I do business with you versus the other funeral home? And if they say something like our service, well, that's like saying our couches are nice. You want to know what differentiates who you're doing business with and why you should do business. Your business is a privilege. It shouldn't be taken for granted. Finally, does the pre-planning specialist know the funeral home's history as well as who the directors are? That's a sure giveaway if somebody is from out of town. They may not know that it's a fourth generation funeral home director or owner. They may not know that the owner of the facility may also be the mayor or something like that. I just pulled that out of my ears. But, they need to know the history. So the purpose of this conversation is encouraging you, the consumer, to look beyond the moment. You're smart. You may not be an expert on this topic. However, with a little information, you can make an informed decision that fits your comfort zone. Again, if your decision ends up being with the person invited you for lunch, so be it. But just remember, you are not in a crisis moment. Hey, if you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you, and I am so glad you didn't wake up dead today. Please jump over to jodyclock.com and download your free copy of my family care plan. This guide will help those you leave behind should you wake up dead. I promise. Be sure to order my book, It's Complicated, based on a true story. Send me an email about topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Until next time, thank you for not falling asleep.